Shut up and sit down.
Guys, come on in. My name is Holly. Welcome to the Murder She Shed. Relax, sit back, and grab a snack. And let me tell you a true crime story that is truly whack. It may even give you a heart attack. You knew that you'd get hit with a rhyme before you heard my true crime. Well, this is Suspense She Shed Sunday, but I'm actually finishing up with the case I was doing on Wacky World Wednesday, which was the Krugersdorp killers. If you haven't heard the first one, you should go back and listen to the first one before you watch this one. But just be advised that some content on this case discusses violent murders, so this is a warning for graphic content. And that was on the first and this one, okay? If you're still here, I'm assuming you want to listen. But hopefully with so many characters in the part 1 story, you guys did not get too confused. I will still add pictures again on this one, and maybe it will help with any confusion. But before we start, hit that like and subscribe for more true crime. Make those buttons chime, and you get to hear this Southern girl rhyme. Okay, I'm done. I really am. I'm done. I'm sorry. I couldn't help myself. That one was just a spur of the moment one. It just happened. Okay, I apologize deeply. The Krugersdorp killers are a cult of serial killers that you might not have heard of. Cecilia Steyn is the leader. My first video, she has already instructed her cult to murder 3 individuals. This time, it is one of their own cult members that is murdered. Do you remember Zach and Michaela Valentine from the first video, where Michaela did not want to assist with the murder? She could not go through with it. Well, Michaela has made a decision to leave the group because the murders are making her physically and mentally unwell. She's even starting to lose weight from the stress of it. Cecilia tells the cult members that Michaela will rat them out to the police and convinces her own husband, Zach, to comply with her evil, scheming plan. What kind of husband is that? Kevin, you better not choose a cult over me. That's all I'm saying. Sorry, that's my husband's name. So Zach convinces Michaela that he's going to leave the group with her, and they make sure he has an alibi when the murder occurs. So on October 4th, 2012, Zach adds sleeping meds to his wife's drink and then heads to work for the day. Meanwhile, Cecilia sends Miranda and her 14-year-old daughter, Marcel, to do all the dirty work. Marcel did not want to be involved, but she was too scared not to do it. There were some crazy people in that cult. Well, maybe there's crazy people in all cults. I'm sure there is. I think Charles Manson was supposed to have been smart, but he's still smart crazy. There's such a thing as that, too. Miranda takes a serrated knife from Cecilia's knife collection and runs and buys a hammer from a hardware store. They enter Michaela's bedroom and find Michaela sleeping on her side. Miranda grabs the hammer and begins to bash Michaela on the head. Her head literally keeps bouncing off the pillow. So she worries that she's not getting a good hit. So she then grabs the serrated knife. This is when Michaela turns on her back and looks up at Miranda with dazed eyes and says, "Miranda." Miranda just says to Michaela, "Say your prayers because I'm going to murder you." Then she begins to stab Michaela. Marcel is standing in the doorway, too stunned to move, when her mom hollers at her, "Where are you?" So she slowly walks up to Michaela and stabs her on the side, but states to her mom that her knife is too dull. She just really didn't want to do it. And so Miranda said, "Never mind, I'm almost done." Miranda was not almost done. She ended up stabbing this girl 64 times. 64 times, y'all. Since Zach and Michaela were in the middle of selling their house, the plan had involved a real estate agent to arrive at the house before Zach, and when Zach showed, they would go in together. So she was there first and she was waiting on him. They went in together, and he came to the bedroom first and looked in and started screaming. He didn't even touch her body. He didn't even touch her at all. Like a normal husband would be like touching you, making sure, you were dead or whatever. But Zach thought he had done a good job of putting on a big show. But the real estate agent said that he had shown more worry about his cats than he did his wife. Both of Miranda's children was told by Miranda if they told anyone about the murders, she would kill them herself. Well, that's Mom of the Year award right there. Wow. James, who was one of the group members, he didn't even know that the cult had in fact murdered 4 people. Remember, Rhea was Cecilia's spiritual mother that broke off all forms of communication, and the reason the murders started in the first place, due to Cecilia's jealousy. Well, Cecilia's next plan was to kill Rhea's son. Rhea's son's name is Joshua Grunwald. He worked as a system engineer at Internet Solutions. This time, Cecilia wanted James in on the murders. She wanted him to participate with them. She told James that they were going to murder Joshua. Okay, this was her reason. Because the young daughter of one of the witches needed a kidney. And Joshua was a exact match. And he didn't want to anger the witches, did he? Cecilia then ordered Miranda's son, Roux, to dig 3 different holes in 3 different spots to bury Joshua in after they murdered him. Apparently, she couldn't decide where she wanted to put the body. James was so scared that he would be the next one killed that he told them he would go along with the plan. He was fearful for his life. He told his girlfriend what was going on, and she phoned Rhea and let her know the plan of her son's murder. So now Rhea knows, so she went to authorities, and they talked to James. They wanted James to record the cult during the time they were discussing the murders that they were planning. And fortunately, he was able to get them on the recorder discussing the murders. James then handed this over to the police, and he was put in a witness protection program. But for unknown reasons, no arrest followed. I'm thinking the police may have not connected the other murders that had occurred with this case yet. The cult finally took a break from their killing spree. During this quiet time, Miranda met a man introduced to her by Cecilia. John Barnard ended up moving in with Miranda, and in 2015, they all hatched a plan to rob John's boss's house because they knew him and his wife often took cash home after they left work. Their names were Peter and Joan Meyer. So Miranda contacted Peter and told him she was a government official and wanted to have a discussion about his business, but that Pete's home was closer to where she was coming from, and she preferred to meet there instead of his place of business. After Miranda, Zach, and Marcel were invited into the house, Miranda pulled a revolver on the couple. They then tied the couple up with cable ties, asked them where the safe was. Peter kept saying, "There is no safe." Zach started getting really irritated, so he takes out the knife he had received from Cecilia and starts stabbing the wife, Joan. Peter then starts quoting Psalms 23 when Zach suddenly stabs him. In between each stab, Peter continues to quote the same Bible verse. How horrible is that? Miranda yells, "How are you planning to find the safe if you kill them both?" Zach seems to have lost complete control and goes from Peter to Joan, repeatedly stabbing them. Meanwhile, during the attack, An associate of Peter's rings the front door. He had told Peter that he would meet him there to be with Peter when he talked to the government officials. And no one answers the door, and he's seen a strange vehicle parked near their house. So he began calling Peter's cell repeatedly until someone finally answered. And it was Marcel that answered. And she told him that Peter and Joan are fighting, and it is a bit hectic right now. Yeah, you can say that again. Would you mind coming back later? The associate finds the whole situation very strange, but he returns back home. The cult was only able to leave with a small amount of money, Peter's wallet, and cards. Cecilia was furious with Zach for losing control and leaving without hardly any money. Peter and Joan's 2 children were the one to discover their parents' bloody bodies. The associate was later able to tell authorities about the BMW that had been strangely parked across the road, and authorities were able to get security cameras around that area. And they observed the BMW several times had been up and down that road, like they were doing surveillance. Miranda's fingerprint was also found at the crime scene. So the police ended up interviewing Miranda and Zach, but they were able to come up with the story pretty quick. They told authorities that they'd been at the couple's house, but they left because there had been another couple there that was causing all kinds of chaos. So they left because they just felt uncomfortable. Cecilia said they still needed money for the orphanage that they supported. But really, Cecilia wanted more money. She just pocketed everything. So a new plan was hatched where Cecilia would become the beneficiary on Zach's life insurance. And they decided they would just fake Zach's death. To do this, they needed a body. So they chose Jared Jackson, a 41-year-old street vendor. Cecilia offered Jared and his pregnant fiancée her storeroom if they would help her clean it out. They were both sleeping on the streets, and it was getting cold at night. So they thought the storeroom would be a warmer place to sleep. So they said, yeah, they were excited to have some place to sleep out of the cold. But someone actually found out they were sleeping in the storeroom, so they had to move out, and they rented a hotel for a few nights. Zach had given them a little money if Jared would go on a ride with him the next day. They really needed the money. On the way out the door, Jared gave his pregnant fiancée a hug and said, "Just remember I love you and I will always love you." That's the last thing she would hear from Jared. And then Zach, LaRox, and Jared headed off on this ride. Jared wasn't sure where they wanted him to go, but he needed the money for the hotel so his pregnant fiancée wouldn't have to stay out in the cold. What a sweet guy. On the drive, Zach pulled out some fruit juice for them to drink and handed Jared his. And they took a few sips to prove that it was okay. But Cecilia had actually crushed up 20 sleeping pills in Jared's drink. And she had also supplied them with a rope. Jared, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, fell asleep after all those sleeping pills. This is when LaRox, who was sitting in the seat right behind Jared, took the rope and placed it around Jared's neck, pulling as tight as he could, while Zach just continued to drive like nothing was going on. Miranda was driving behind them in her car. When they drove off on the side of the road where they put Jared in the driver's seat and left Zach's cell phone in his vehicle. It is not clear if Jared was dead or just unconscious. Either way, they poured gas over the vehicle and Jared's body. They then set it on fire and got in Miranda's vehicle to head back to Cecilia to inform their leader that it was done. Karen, Jared's fiancée, was super worried when Jared did not show up the next day. So she walked to Cecilia's house, where Cecilia told her Zach had died in a car wreck, and Jared had never got in the car with Zach. She said she was unsure of where Jared was, other than Zach did mention to her that he had seen Jared talking to a couple of men across the road from the hotel. They seemed upset with Jared, so Zach didn't want to get into that, so he just kept driving. The officers soon found out that it was Zach's car, and Miranda came in to identify his body. When she got there to ID him, she said, "Yes, that's my brother, Zach." She just played like he was her brother. Miranda then asked if he could be cremated. Meanwhile, Zach was set up in a hotel where Roux would bring him everything he needed. Zach even left his beloved cats behind, the ones he was so worried about when his wife got murdered. Jared, who had been so excited about having a new baby daughter, unfortunately did not live long enough to see her born just 3 weeks later. Karen at this time was beginning not to believe Cecilia's story. The authorities had stopped the cremation from happening on the body. They wanted to make sure it's actually Zach's first. Zach's parents had come in from out of town and wanted to have a service for him before they left, but authorities did not want to release the body till a DNA analysis was performed. Meanwhile, Cecilia and the other cult members were working hard trying to receive Zach's life insurance. But the insurance company smelled a rat. They observed that Cecilia had become the main beneficiary right before his death, and that she had also made a payment several days before his death to settle the premiums. They also noticed that Cecilia's whole family did have life insurance through them, but it was canceled due to non-payment, but somehow she magically came up with Zach's. They were having trouble paying for Zach's hotel and food, and some nights he would sleep on the streets and have nothing to eat due to his bank account being frozen and them not being able to get the life insurance money. They were getting broke. This is when Miranda's now live-in boyfriend, John, suggested robbing a man named Glen McGregor. He was a tax consultant. Miranda made an appointment with Glen for some tax advice. They drove to his house where Miranda surprised him with a home visit because she said she needed quick tax advice. Although Glen seemed surprised, he let her in. But as soon as he did, she pulled out a revolver. Roux and Marcel came in, and Miranda yelled to Glen, "Lay down, we're going to rob you." Glen suddenly made a move for Roux, trying to disarm him. Miranda panicked and pulled the trigger, shooting Glen in the stomach, in the side, and even in the back as he turned. He fell at this point, and they got some adhesive tape to tie him with. They searched the whole house but found nothing of value. Miranda barked at the now dying Glen to give her his account number and PIN number. He refused until she told him that she would call for help if he told her what it was. This persuaded him to tell her, and so she called the bank and had the money transferred into her account. And she made it look like he had just paid her for sex. Apparently she thought highly of herself because she took all the money out of the account. Then Roux put a plastic bag over Glen's head and then put a rope around his neck. Roux then climbed on his back and pulled as hard as he could for 2 minutes. When finally they noticed Glen had passed away, they then pulled Glen's body to the bathroom, where they put him fully clothed into the bathtub, ran water all the way to the top in order to destroy any DNA that might be found on his body. Cecilia made Miranda get the money out of her account because she wanted to put the money to good use. And apparently it didn't involve taking care of Zach anymore because he was costing them too much money. They quickly went through Glen's money because he did not have a great amount in his account. And Cecilia said they needed to find another victim. In the end, Miranda suggested her own financial broker. His name was Anthony Schofield. The Rocks called Anthony and posed as a man named Roux that wanted to talk to him about possible investments. Anthony agreed to meet Roux at a place called the Spur. After Anthony arrived at the Spur, Roux then called saying his wife was at work and he didn't have transportation to get there. Could he come over to his apartment? He met Roux downstairs of his apartment and then they walked up together. Miranda opens the door and of course Anthony knows Miranda and told her, "Hey, thanks for sending some business my way." When he came inside, they offered him some tea and said they were sorry about the loud music, that they had a couple of friends in the back room. Actually, the music was a disguise to cover any noise that might occur. This is when Miranda jumps up, pulling her .38 special out of her pocket, and hollers, "This is a stick-up. We are going to rob you." When LaRock said to her while laughing, "Ma, it isn't a stick-up. It's called a hold-up." Anthony thought this was all a bad joke at first, but when LaRock goes to tie him up, he starts fighting. But the 21-year-old LaRock is much stronger than the 60-year-old Anthony. LaRock gets him tied up and then pulls his wallet out of his pocket, where Miranda yells at Anthony to give her his PIN number. Anthony then tells them his PIN number. Miranda yells at John and Marcel, who were hiding in the bedroom, to walk down to an ATM and get the money. They called Miranda and let them know that they had the money and the PIN number worked. So just like the last victim, LaRock climbs onto Anthony's back and begins to choke him. Afterwards, they wrapped Anthony's body in plastic and carried him down the stairs of the apartment and put him in the trunk of his car. They drove it off a little ways and left it there with the keys still in the ignition, hoping that someone would actually steal the vehicle. Anthony's wife contacted police when he did not return. Police located the vehicle and they said there was someone sleeping in the trunk. Someone sleeping in the trunk. Okay. That policeman might have been a little slow, I'm not sure. I think that's a weird thing for a police officer to think. But upon further inspection, realized that the individual was deceased. Imagine that. Cecilia has LaRock draw out the daily limit every day from the ATMs. But on the third day, they found out that the card had been canceled. The financial advisor worked out so well, they decided to rob another financial advisor. His name was Kevin McAlpine. This was Kevin's last appointment on this job because he had promised his pregnant wife he would find a better job in order to support them, because he didn't make a lot of money. They were able to lure Kevin to their apartment in the same way as they did Anthony. In fact, the robbery was done in the exact same manner. While Marcel was checking out the bank card, Kevin asked if he could smoke a cigarette. So they tied Kevin's hands in front so he could smoke. When LaRock attempted to choke him, Kevin fought so hard that he ended up scratching his face badly while attempting to get the rope off his neck because they tied it in the front. They then invited Cecilia to the apartment to show them what they had done. They were proud of it. And she walked over to Kevin's body and kicked him hard in the ribs. They then loaded him in the trunk and parked his car in the same area that they had Anthony's. Kevin's wife began to panic when he didn't return, and the bank had also called her and reported irregular activity on the card. She called the police and they soon located his body. They received almost no money from Kevin's murder, so Cecilia was not very happy. Cecilia was thinking they were not getting much money out of the financial advisor, so this time she decided to rob a real estate agent. This is when Miranda called Hanley Ladigan so that she could show Miranda some of the houses in the area. Hanley came to pick her up from her apartment because she said she had no transport. She just moved here and she didn't have no way to get around. When Hanley walked up to the apartment door, Miranda pulled her .38 on her immediately. Hanley was so rattled, she had trouble remembering her PIN number. I can't even remember it when I'm at the grocery store trying to put it in. She does better than me. I definitely wouldn't remember it there. After Marcel and John got to the ATM, they couldn't withdraw anything, so they called Miranda. Hanley then told them they couldn't withdraw anything because there was no money in it, so some money would have to be transferred into the account first. Miranda handed Hanley the phone and told her to transfer some. Instead, she transferred it all into her husband's account. Her husband happened to see she had done that and grew suspicious and called Hanley's office and asked them who Hanley was meeting with. Marcel was still unable to withdraw money after that, so Miranda just told Roux to finish her off. Roux whined that he did not want to kill a woman, so Miranda turned her .38 on her son and said, "Do it." So he choked her in the same way. Due to her car having Remax stickers all over it and that it could be too easily identified, they only drove it across the road before dumping it. Then they loaded Hanley's body into Miranda's vehicle and drove her body out to a more secluded spot and dumped it on the side of the road. Hanley's husband had already called police, and it didn't take them but a few minutes to find her vehicle. And they did suspect her body would be in the trunk. But, much to their surprise, it was not. Cecilia even came out and spoke to the police and looked in awe that something like this could happen in her neighborhood. Who would have thought? Children discovered Hanley's body the next morning when they were walking to school. They began looking at cameras around the ATMs, and although Marcel and Roux had been trying to hide their appearance in the videos wearing thick clothing, someone actually recognized them, and they were quickly arrested, which was not a moment too soon because Cecilia had already planned on her 12th murder, and it was a medical doctor. Roux immediately confessed to everything because he had spoke to his mom, who told him to admit that he had murdered the victims and to leave her and Cecilia out of this, and she would make sure that his bail got paid. Marcel, she just stayed silent. Karen called the police office and let them know that Jared was last seen with Roux, and she had seen that he had got arrested. And about that time, the DNA results came back, and the burnt body was Jared. Now the police were on the hunt for Zach. When they located Zach, he had changed his name to Michael and was working at a new church ministry. But someone at the ministry was able to ID him through photographs. The police made the final ID by his tattoos. His whole back was covered. The police claimed the body of Hanley's corpse had been found on Marcel's phone when arrested. Miranda went on the news stating how she was so shocked that her son and daughter had been arrested for the murders. And she said she solidly stood by their side. The next day after the interview, she went and put Cecilia on her will as the beneficiary of all her assets. So no matter if the children got out of jail or not, Cecilia would get everything. Miranda was a teacher at a local school, and police received a tip to search her classroom. How scary would this be? Because they found 3,000 bullets, shotgun pellets, loading instruments and gunpowder in her classroom. Then both her and Cecilia were soon arrested. Because John had took his cell phone to every murder, they were able to trace him to the crime scenes. Smart John. One of the officers then took Miranda's will to Roux to show him that his mother had disinherited him. He soon began to sing like a songbird. Roux showed the officer a tattoo on his neck and told him that it represented him being controlled by his mother. John Barnard pled guilty to 13 charges, and he received 20 years in prison in exchange for his testimony. Roux received 25 years for turning state witness. Cecilia Steyn received 13 life sentences plus 155 years, and still claiming she was innocent. Zach Valentine is serving 8 life sentences plus 93 years. Marcel Steyn received 7 life sentences plus 144 years since she was only 14 on the first 2 murders. She was not charged for them. Miranda, who was still telling the court that Cecilia was not involved, she still had the hots for Cecilia, received 11 life sentences plus 115 years. Well, guys, there was a lot to this case, so I hope it was not too confusing. I will see y'all in the Murder She Shed for Wacky World Wednesday. If you hit the like and subscribe, you will be able to get notification the next time we meet in the She Shed. You guys be safe out there, and please don't go and join any cults, okay? I care about you. Not a good idea. Much love sent your way from this Okie gal right from the Murder She Shed. Bye. See you Wednesday. Simon, say hi. Say hi. Say, I'm the superstar. Say yes.